Are we ready?
Everyone ready? Okay, let's get started. I'm Annette Kleinkopp, one of the team leaders of the Emergency Service Volunteer Program in Palo Alto, and I'm joined by my two other team leaders, Karen Pauls. Karen, wave your hand, and Dan Mellick. So, Dan, thank you. And we are all just so delighted to see you in person and also our Zoom audience out there. And I welcome everyone on behalf of the city and for our chiefs. A few housekeeping rules before I introduce our moderator, Vice Mayor Lydia Koo. This is a great time for everyone to turn off your cell phones or at least place them in stun mode. The bathrooms are behind us and they can be accessed from the patio. Since this is a public safety event, please note the exits, but in a disaster, just follow those guys. Finally, for the in-person audience, as well as at our Zoomers, there will be a chance to answer questions at the end of the panel discussion. If you're here in person, we're going to be passing out some white cards, which we will pick up. We'll ask you to write your questions on that. If you're a Zoomer at home, if you notice at the very bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A line. If you click on that, you can submit your question that way. Now, it's an honor and a privilege to introduce my friend and Vice Mayor, our moderator, Lydia Koo. It's most appropriate for Lydia to moderate our discussion since she's been one of the fiercest champions of public safety on the council. Lydia has been involved with emergency preparedness for well over a decade as a CERT, an emergency service volunteer, a team leader, a CERT trainer, and has remained an active volunteer. So at this time, please help me to welcome our moderator, Vice Mayor Lydia Koo.
Thank you, Annette. That was very kind. Good evening. We expect to feel safe in our community, be it that one just works here or lives here. Public safety involves protecting the public. We have fire, police, and the Office of Emergency Services. No matter the role, the primary goal of public safety professionals is to prevent danger and to protect the well-being of citizens, communities, and organizations. During the pandemic, our public safety departments were downsized due to budget reductions. The good news is, as we rebound, the council has also reinstated some public safety positions to address crime, investing in our wildland fire protection programs, and to think and prepare for whatever may come our way, especially the worst catastrophe. Tonight, we're here to meet and hear from the City of Palo Alto's public safety chiefs. So I want to start to introduce, firstly, Chief Gio Blackshire has been a member of the Palo Alto Fire Department for 24 years. After receiving a BA in English from California State University at Dominguez Hills, he joined the Palo Alto Fire Department and worked his way through the ranks. He was appointed as fire chief in June of 2019. Chief Blackshire was confirmed as a certified fire chief. I'm sorry, wait, let me get this right. He was confirmed as certified chief fire officer by the Commission on Professional Credentialing in 2017. He is also a graduate from the Fire Service Executive Development Institute and the International Association of Fire Chiefs Diversity Executive Leadership Program. Chief Blackshire is dedicated to serving the community, this community, the safety and wellness of the Palo Alto firefighters, and hiring a diverse group of new firefighters to continue the fire department's tradition of exceptional service to the citizens of Palo Alto. Welcome, Chief Blackshire.
Good afternoon. Is this
Thank you for that introduction. I wonder who wrote that. A great job. Good evening, or is it evening? Yeah, good evening. My name is Gio Blackshire, Palo Alto Fire Chief here, and like Vice Mayor Koo said, I've been here for 24 years, and it's been quite the pleasure. It's been a wonderful career so far, and it continues to be. Let me see. I didn't practice with this. I have a short presentation, and hopefully it'll be educational, but also somewhat entertaining, but maybe spark some ideas and some questions for you, because I think definitely you deserve to know how we serve and why we serve and what we're doing to continue our model here. Nope. Is that you or me? Oh, it's me. It's me. All right, here we go. All right, so who we are, Palo Alto Fire Department. So we have 5 fire stations in Palo Alto proper, and we also serve Stanford University. We have a contract with them since the mid-70s, and we continue to. We currently have 95 total members. That's the entire fire department, including administration. We respond, well, last year we responded to a little over 7,000 calls, and just under that the year before in 2020 due to COVID. But prior to that, we were over 9,000 calls in the city of Palo Alto, which was our highest year thus far. And we're starting to steadily see the call volume creep back up to pre-COVID levels. Move this one over. There we go. Nice. All right, so yeah, approximately 60% of our total calls are EMS, emergency medical services, and we respond to approximately 140 fires per year. It's quite a bit, and all of them don't make the news, but that's an accurate number. We have an operating budget around 35 million, and our cost recovery is around 10 million, primarily from the Stanford contract, the agreement we have with them. And we have our own ambulance service in Palo Alto, the only city in the county that has our own ambulance transport service. So we also get revenue from that as well. And so our net cost to the general fund is about $25 million. We have 3 major divisions in fire. It's operations, which typically is the emergency services, and first responders is fire prevention, and there's support services. Support services primarily deals with training, hiring, promoting, facilities, apparatus, etc. That is Fire Station 3 in that picture. That's our newest fire station. It opened up in March of 20, right after COVID hit. So we never got to do a ribbon cutting ceremony for that, but we're working on that. And we're working on this. We're getting there. There we go. You got to look at it. That's what it is. All right, how we serve you. So, you know, when I was first hired in 97, I was told the fire department's a jack of all trades. Master of some, most of them. But that is, it's true. It's, you know, I've been on so many different calls that are not quote unquote fire related, just because someone needs help. Whether it's, you know, sometimes it's someone that's trapped in a car. Sometimes you get you know, we have a kid in the park whose head's caught between some bars. And we've even, if you follow us on Instagram or Twitter, you'll see that we've actually rescued some animals, actually recently. So we're a jack of all trades, primarily fire and life safety, anything dealing with preserving life and property and environment. Then there's all these extra type calls that we respond to that you may not be aware of. But you know, when you call 911, the dispatchers are the ones who really determine the best solution. In many cases, it will be police and fire, and other community services also. Programs for our community. So this one is a new program launched by the fire department. This is called the Palo Alto Fire Med program, and this is related to our ambulance service. This program is a subscription service where you pay a small fee every month, and what it does, it covers the copay of the ambulance service. So you'll have what the insurance covers, and what the insurance doesn't cover, the fire department will pick up. So this is brand new. I think we launched about 2 weeks ago, and it's just a service that we've seen in other communities that have their own ambulance service, and it's been going on in the communities that we surveyed. It's been going on for decades. And because it hasn't gone, it's still popular. We felt that this community also deserves such a program, so we felt we should launch it. And it supports the program, it supports the fire department and our EMS division. And hopefully people sign up and get involved, and hopefully you don't have to use it, but if you do, we're here. All right, our future, community demographics and industry trends. So citizens who are over 65 make up 70% of Palo Alto. And so more ambulances are needed in the community. So that's what we do here in Palo Alto, which is really, sounds like it would be obvious and business as usual to kind of do an assessment of your fire department, say, is this the best way to deliver service? And it's true, because 60% of our calls are medical, you would say, well, we need more ambulances and less fire engines. So on the surface, that may make sense. You say, well, if you're going on mostly medical calls, why do you have so many fire engines? And some people even ask, why do you send a fire engine and an ambulance to a call? But the reality is although we run to 60% medical calls, as you saw, there's about 140 fires a year in Palo Alto. And when we have those fires, there's a certain amount of resources we need on scene. We call that our effective fire force. So when there's a fire, we need so many people to do so many things on the fire. There's just suppression, there's water supply, there's search and rescue, there's each division of the house, there's ventilation, et cetera, et cetera. And so if we just had a bunch of ambulances, how are we going to address these fires effectively? And just keep in mind, when there's fires going on, there's other calls that keep coming in. So it's not like emergency calls just stop when we have a fire. We have to make sure that we have resources available for other emergencies. And that's why we really rely on our neighbors as well. So Mountain View, the reciprocity, we call that mutual aid. We go in and out of each other's districts when we're too busy, or if we just need assistance. Same thing goes with County Fire, Woodside, and Cal Fire, and Menlo Park. And so citizens who are 65 and older are 49% of our ambulance transports. And the need is going up because people are living longer, and there's a desire to remain independent. And with that, it becomes, those that have health issues theoretically may need our services more often. So that's why there's a higher rise in medical care and medical transport. I'm getting it down now. That's what it is. When you're up here, shoot it over your head. Shoot it, get it? No pun intended. It really wasn't, but okay. Calling 911. So the police department's dispatchers dispatch for Palo Alto, and the chief will talk about that, about being the 4th busiest dispatch center in the county. But they just do, for us, they do fire and ambulance response. And our performance goal is to get to the emergency in 8 minutes or less, 90% of the time. And we do meet that. And we get a paramedic on scene. The standard is to get a paramedic on scene within 11 minutes and 59 seconds or 12 minutes. 90% of the time, and we're hitting at about 99 to 98% every year. Because Palo Alto has their own ambulances, our response times are really, really exceptional. Every unit we have has a paramedic and an EMT on there, so we're really heavy with our advanced life support. And our ambulance transportation, that's one thing that is the envy of every fire agency in the county. And not only is it a better service, but it does provide some cost recovery. Not entirely, because the fees that we charge for transport aren't necessarily covered by insurance programs like Medicaid and Medicare. But it's an exceptional service. And I give everything? Yeah. Okay. Wildland-urban interface. This is the big one that you've been hearing about lately. It's almost fire season year round. When I was hired back in '97, fire season went from about June 30th to October 31st. That was it. And it was pretty much a staple. It was a standard, and you can mark it on your calendar. Now fire season is just about, the cliche is that it's year round, and it is in some cases, depending on where you are in California. But typically in about April, May is when Cal Fire really starts ramping up their resources. By the end of this month, they'll be fully staffed, which means they put an engine in every fire station. So in Palo Alto, we just started an agreement last year with Los Altos Hills Fire District and County Fire to staff Fire Station 8 in the foothills. So it's a agreement that all agencies benefit, Los Altos Hills, Los Altos, and Palo Alto. We staff it with both Palo Alto and County Fire members. It's a great model, and worked it out really fast. We do inspections. So the foothills, every single resident in the foothills gets a fire inspection. We send firefighters and inspectors up there to look at the property, and we make notes on anything that could be of concern. Should there be, just to be, have your residents prepped and be able to have the best situation in the case of a fire. That means the distance that you have combustibles to your home, clearing off the roof, the gutters. And it's quite the list, and it's pretty labor intensive, but it's worth it. If you go to our website, we have links that will take you to the Ready, Set, Go on for fire prevention. And we have a mutual aid agreement with CAL FIRE. That would be CAL FIRE is the second largest fire department in the country, but we have a great relation with them. And as you know, there was the CZU fire and the SCU fire, and we responded on both of those. Palo Alto units were on both of those. But that's the part of the state mutual aid system, is where county units, county resources will aid other agencies around the state. And should we, and hopefully never, need their assistance when it comes to a fire in the foothills, but we would rely heavily on those resources, because remember, we can't send all our resources up the hill because emergencies will still happen while there's a fire. But so far we've been very lucky. And the reality is, the message I want to get across is a couple things. One, regardless of where we are and what we're doing, California is designed to burn. It always has, it always will be. It's designed to burn, just the way the landscape is. But it is our job, and unfortunately it's caused by weather, but now we're a factor. The human factor is also something to consider when starting wildland fires. And so the likelihood that it can happen in our foothills, you can't say it'll never happen. As soon as we say that, it will. But what we can do is put our best foot forward and really take this seriously and be a part of the solution. And that solution is prevention and preparedness. Community risk reduction. So as I was saying, the way I look at it is that the community is the first line of defense. And I'm sure that's the case for law enforcement as well. What we want to do is just prevent the emergency from happening. The look, listen, and learn is a common saying that we say in fire prevention. You look for places where fire can start, you listen for the sound of a smoke alarm, and you have two ways out. We have this saying that we say in the fire department, and it came from a law enforcement speaker, Gordon Graham, but we say if it's predictable, it's preventable. And so if you could look around your home and see things that are a fire hazard, you don't address it. If you address it, you can prevent it from happening. Smoke alarms, you don't take the batteries out. If they're beeping, you don't turn it off so it stops beeping, you replace it. And and you have to do these fire drills in the home. You have to go around and make sure that if it happened in the middle of the night, what's your plan? What's valuable to you? Because of all the fires that I've been on and all the years I've been with the Palo Alto fire, I have yet to meet a resident to say, I knew my house was going to catch on fire today. They don't say that. That's why they're emergencies. And then after their home, they lose their home, they talk about all the valuables that they lost, everything that they wish they had. And what we don't want is people running back in the home for this stuff. And we have seen people stuff that means so much to them, but there are ways to prevent that. And there are ways to prepare for that. And so as much time as it's kind of burdensome and it's time labor intensive, but you want to take the time to do these things, because when it happens, if it happens, you want to be able to say we did the best we could to save what's really valuable to us, not only your lives, but everything that's materialistic that's valuable to you, whether you keep it in a fire safe or it's something that you put in a bag that you can easily grab. And the front door may not necessarily be your best way out, maybe the window. My mother at home lives her bedroom's on the second floor, and she had to buy a ladder from Home Depot to throw out her with grabs onto the sill and put it down. It seemed silly, and she thought it was being silly, but the kitchen's near the front door. And I said, if it's a kitchen fire, how are you going to get out? That's where the stairs are. So she went ahead and bought one. And, well, I bought it for her. She hasn't had to use it yet, thank goodness. But it's that type of stuff where, at first it was like, do you really want me to buy this thing? Like, yeah, you really need to buy it, because when you deal with it firsthand, it resonates differently. It really hits home. And the fires in Paradise, I read an article in the New York Times Magazine, and the person that was really telling the story talked about how difficult it was to escape because it was in the middle of the night and they weren't ready. No one was ready. And that made everything more complicated. Evacuation was complicated, where to go was complicated, just getting out the house was complicated because it was in the middle of the night. So, as much as, you think it's not going to happen, but it can, and you want to be prepared. I went the wrong way. Okay, that's us. So stay informed. We are on social media. We are starting to re-engage. We had someone that ran our social media and they don't anymore. So we're gonna get a new social media team back up and going and tell our story on the internet, photos and safety messages, etc. We're on Instagram, Twitter, we're on Facebook, and these apps you can download. CAL FIRE has an app called Ready for Wildfire that's very helpful for getting incident information, preparedness. And PulsePoint is an app that you can download on your phone that has all the information for our calls. So whenever there's a call for service for the fire department, it pops up on PulsePoint. Medical calls don't give details. You'll know there's a medical call, but it won't say exactly where. So it does have some privacy on there, but you'll know that there's a call and when units are available and which ones are on calls and what type of call. And we use that quite a bit until we got a new app that shows us the calls and the details. But PulsePoint was kind of a go-to. So if you're interested in what kind of emergencies are going on in the city, you can always download that app as well. So that being said, that's all I got for you. And I'm going to introduce, are you going to introduce the chief? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that was quite a bit of information. Our next chief is Chief Bob Johnson. Chief Bob Johnson has been in the law enforcement since 1986. Prior to his appointment at Palo Alto Police Department, he was the chief of police for the Menlo Park Police Department for 5 years, where he led the organization to receiving the IACP/Cisco Community Policing Award. Most of Chief Johnson's career was with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, where he worked for 27 years with his last command as the captain of Lancaster Sheriff's Station, serving the city of Lancaster. Prior to being promoted to captain, he was the coordinator of the Antelope Valley Crime Fighting Initiative, where he developed crime reduction strategies for a 1,370 square mile region. Significant crime reductions and greater community collaboration led to the Antelope Valley Crime Fighting Initiative receiving the James Q. Wilson Award for Community Policing in 2010. Chief Johnson believes it's essential to provide personnel with the best training possible so everyone can live healthy lives while serving their communities. And here's Chief Johnson.
So thank you, Vice Mayor. We're going to do something a little different tonight. One of the reasons for that is this is my last Meet the Chiefs event for the city of Palo Alto. And I appreciate the comments in the background. And it's true, I've been doing this for 36 years now. And I remember when I came over from Menlo Park to Palo Alto, one of the first questions I was asked is, why do you want to come from Menlo Park to Palo Alto? Literally just across the street. And it was very clear to me. And I said, my response was, because this is Palo Alto. And I have believed that from day one. I think this is an amazing city. And really what I wanted to do tonight is thank you for allowing me to be your chief, for having the patience, the grace, and being our partners over the last 4 years, because there were several reasons why I was actually brought over here in 2018. One was to rebuild the organization, who had had significant loss in staffing, and there was quite a few vacancies, to build up the management team for succession planning, and really to reintegrate this concept of community policing into the organization. And in 2018 and 2019, you may be aware, we were on a roll of doing all those things. We had filled our vacancies. We had formed the community advisory group. We were doing national night outs, community engagements, ice cream socials, you name it, we were involved. We had at least 3 community academies each year. And then this little thing came about called the pandemic, right? And so that disrupted a lot of things. And to the vice mayor's point, we had significant budget reductions in that year of 2020. And without having a crystal ball, we had a few other things that followed that, right? Especially in our profession of law enforcement with the George Floyd, police reform, all of these things, these cascading events really did take their toll. And some would say that the last 2 years in this profession of law enforcement have been extremely challenging. And I actually wouldn't disagree. They have been for a lot of reasons, but I would also say they've probably been an amazing opportunity for law enforcement. And I will say this about Palo Alto. We have not received a community, we may not have a James Q. Wilson Award, we may not have the IACP Award yet, but we've actually applied for a couple of national awards for community policing because of what we've done together during this pandemic and police reform. We have been extremely engaged in the ad hocs with the council over the last year, really working on race, equity, policy, equality, inclusion, police reform, our policies, our protocols, how we respond, implementing a psychiatric emergency response team, which you'll hear more about later. And even with all the things going on in our society, we've actually done a really good job keeping crime really at a very reasonable level, and actually have had reductions in almost all of our property-related offenses of 2021. So a lot of great progress. And I remember hearing a podcast just recently with Canalisa Rice making the statement that the great thing about America is that we're impatient for change. But then she followed it up with saying, but sometimes impatience runs over progress. And while we like change and we want change for the better, we do forget about the progress that we've made sometimes. And Palo Alto Police Department has really progressed in so many areas over the last couple of years and how we serve this community. And last thing I want to say before I pass the baton to the Assistant Chief, Andrew Bender, who will officially be taking over as the acting chief in a couple of weeks, as I step aside for what some of you may or may not be aware of. I've maybe need a psychologist, but I've entered the race for sheriff of Santa Clara County. And that is a time commitment that I have to devote to. So Chief Bender is extremely equipped to keep us moving forward. But I will say this, I want to thank again the Vice Mayor and the Council for the restorations they've given us over the last 6 months and the restorations they moved forward as recently as this afternoon. We're back into the rebuilding. We will rebuild. We will bring back the traffic team someday. We will start the community academies again someday, and we will get this community where they deserve to be. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much, and especially to Annette. For some of you may not know, she was the one that swore me in 4.5 years ago as the chief. So I really feel blessed to be here for her tonight and for all of you. So again, thank you. And with that, I want to officially hand the baton over to Chief Andrew Bender to talk a little more about our initiatives and what we've been doing and what we're going to be doing for this community in the future. So with that, Andrew Bender.
Thanks, Chief. I'll just say that the chief has not only accomplished everything that they brought him over for, but over the last 2 years, it's been such a privilege to work for him. And when he describes these last 2 years being so difficult for the profession and the perseverance of the department and our staff, a lot of that was because the chief was at the helm and he was leading the charge. And it wasn't only a benefit to our community, but also internally to our department. And the chief knows that. So many times I walked into his office late at night after long meetings and frustrating talks and emotional talks, and he was always there to comfort and to lead, and was always showing up first thing in the morning the next day. And I don't know if he has ever shared, but he's had a kind of a nickname that has followed him throughout his career, and he was known for not giving up. And to this day, Chief, that's always followed you, and it's been apparent to us that the chief, he won't tap out, and it's been a real privilege. So I just wanted to recognize that. I just also want to acknowledge how great it is to be here in person and to connect with you guys in the same room. For you Zoomers at home, There's a couple empty seats, so if you're on the fence about coming down, head on down. I will caution you, if you get pulled over for speeding or running a stop sign, I'm not going to vouch for you, and you're not going to get to say Assistant Chief said that was okay. But in all seriousness, we're great to have you virtually join us as well. So I want to thank OES and Annette and the Emergency Services Program and Vice Mayor Koo for moderating and having us tonight. And with that, let's get into it. Hopefully I can work this. I don't want to get shown up by fire. Chief Blackshire, is that? Let's see here. Try that. Here we go. All right, it's already been alluded to, but there's been a lot of conversation about our personnel and the department as it was even just a couple years ago, pre-pandemic, I would say, and where we sit now. And I'll just echo the chief's sentiment that we are rebuilding, and that is in large part to the support we've gotten from the vice mayor and entire council and our community who's come out and supported us in emails and calls and publicly, and we're very grateful for that. And I will tell you that the word that I would use to describe the department moving forward is hopeful. And we know that we're going to get back to that community engagement and level of service that the community deserves. But you'll see there that even from 2018 to 2019, as we sit in this current fiscal budget, back on July 1 of 2021, we were down to 125 total authorized positions there within the police department. That's a pretty stark drop in personnel. For our sworn staffing there on the lower left-hand column, you'll see some numbers I put for you. That's just our sworn. So those are our badges and guns. Prior to July 21, 2020, and that was just right when COVID was hitting, we had 92 sworn officers. The last 2 years, we've been authorized at 79. I will tell you that number is a little misleading because that's authorized. That's not actual bodies in the building. You know, we do lose personnel to attrition, retirement, resignation. We have people who are out on injury. And so we've been even under that 79 number for quite a while. But just as little as a few hours ago in our finance committee meeting, part of our budget, which is public, you can go look at that online if you like, we proposed adding technically 5 positions. We're getting a lieutenant back from the city manager's office who's going to be in charge of our personnel and training, and we're hoping to get back up to 84. And as the chief kind of alluded to, last fall and earlier this year, our dispatch, which we actually call our communications manager, they've given us that position back, and our technical services director back. For the last 2 years, we've had a captain actually overseeing the technical services director. And so we've recruited and hired an internal candidate for that position, and we're really excited to get that captain back contributing to the sworn issues. All right. Some of this was discussed back on April 4th when we were before council, and Chief Johnson was providing a kind of a year in review to council. And there's plenty of statistics online if you'd like to go see them. They go back a number of years. So I'm not going to rehash all of those statistics. I just want to point out a couple things. Palo Alto, you will read the headlines, and there is crime out there. I definitely want to acknowledge that. But overall, Palo Alto has a very, very low violent crime rate. It's a very safe city. And year over year, we continue to see that our most prevalent crimes are our property crimes like burglary, theft, shoplifting. And, the department is proactively addressing those. And we have a number of ways that we do that. And as Chief Johnson noted back in April, that we noticed, or the statistics will tell you in 21, that every property crime in 2021 was reduced. And in total, we had the fewest criminal overall crime in 3 years back in 2021. And so we're real proud of that, especially when you look at our personnel limitations. I will tell you that through pandemic, through budget cuts, through police reform, through a lot of really heavy things, our personnel have continued to show up to work. And we've continued to provide public safety service for 24/7, 365 days a year. And the chief and I are very proud of that. All right, Chief Blackshire alluded to this. Palo Alto is a really busy city. Our dispatch center is really busy. It was mentioned we are the fourth busiest dispatch center in the county. We're proud of that. We have a really talented dispatchers that are in there to receive your emergency and the non-emergency calls. They work really hard, sometimes under very stressful conditions for very long hours. If you're looking at just police calls for service, that's anytime someone calls 911 or a non-emergency line and needs a cop to show up. Generally in the past, before COVID, so that's your 2019 number, it's generally floated around 50,000 calls for service. You can see we had a dip, a little bit of a dip in 2020 and a bigger dip in 2021. There's a lot of factors that play into that. I just got our 2023 year-to-date stats. We're at just over 13,500 calls for service. What does that all mean? Well, we're really busy, and there's definitely a need for the police in this community, and we're happy to respond to that. I think it was mentioned our dispatch center handles calls from the police department, the fire department, the animal control officers, Stanford Public Safety, and our utilities division within the city. So that phone is always ringing. One statistic that we're really proud of, last year in 2021, there were over 38,000 emergency calls for service, and over 99% of those were answered in less than 10 seconds. So when our residents in our community are calling 911, our dispatchers are jumping on that phone to answer it. I won't go through all of these, but we've been very active over the last couple years. Last year was no exception. There's a number of initiatives. Palo Alto Police Department is very proud of our initiatives and our accomplishments, and Chief Johnson has repeatedly shared in public forums that we're willing to put up what we've done over the last 2 years against any other law enforcement agency, not only in this county, but in the region. And we're really proud of that. Some of the things you'll see up there, first checkpoint there is our independent police auditor. They're actually currently working on a review of our hiring process. And we're looking forward to that report for any recommendations or best practices they may have in our hiring. And I'll talk a little bit about hiring a little bit later in this presentation. But we're doing a great job in that. And if we can do better, we're always open to those types of input. One of the things that we'll also talk about that I'm really, Chief Johnson and I are really proud of, and we're the envy of all the other cities in the county, is our PERT program. That's our Psychiatric Emergency Response Team. That's where we have a behavioral health clinician on loan from Santa Clara County Behavioral Health Services, and they're paired with one of our officers or a full-time unit. We'll talk about that in just a second here. And then lastly, and this came up last night, I want to recognize our online reporting system. This is just another avenue in a pandemic or for whatever circumstances may stand in the way of our community getting a hold of us and contacting us. This is just another option that we offer for them. And I will tell you, it's been wildly successful. Our supervisors get those reports, they review them. If there's follow-up, we take care of that. And you could essentially, from the comfort of your own home, you can file a police report online. It's a really cool system. On April 4th, we had a very comprehensive discussion about radio encryption. I won't go too much into it, but I will say, just as a reminder, that back in October of 2020, there was a DOJ memo that mandated that law enforcement agencies protect confidential information. Last January 2021, Palo Alto became the 8th law enforcement agency in Santa Clara County to encrypt. And since then, every law enforcement agency in Santa Clara County has encrypted except for one, and that is San Jose Community College. And actually, I work out with their chief, and he told me last week they're almost there. So, but I want to acknowledge that radio encryption is a very frustrating topic for a lot of us in the community, including the police department. And the chief had shared this back in April, but I just want to reaffirm that it was never the PD's intention to cause any undue frustration with frustration. And we believe that the public does have a right to know what the police are doing and when we're doing that. And to that point, we are working on keeping the public informed. I will say that it's a work in progress. This January of this year, the police department, in conjunction with our IT, launched an interactive calls for service map that shows closed calls for service. April 4th, we got some additional direction from council. You'll see it up there. And what I can tell you is that that is in the works. And you know, it's our endeavor to get information out to our community, to our media partners, and to let them know what we're doing. So hopefully there's going to be some follow-up with that soon. And then the last thing I'll point out is Senate Bill 1000. The chief and I have been on a call with Senator Becker's staff, and Senate Bill 1000, which is working its way through the legislature, will require law enforcement agencies to ensure that the public has access to radio communications. As I had just spoken about, this is our Pert team. I would say this is one of the crown jewels of this county, because there's only 3 teams in existence right now within the county. Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office has 2 of them, and then Palo Alto has the other. So we're the only city in the county. And I will tell you, the chief gets calls frequently to share, beg, borrow, and steal our Pert officer, and he resoundingly answers no, because there's a value to the community. But in all seriousness, the long-term plan is to have one of these in every city and to have full coverage. They're just an amazing aspect and complement to our patrol services. And I won't rehash every bullet point up there, but like I said, it's a behavioral health clinician that's paired with our officer. They work 40 hours a week, Sunday through Wednesday. They're full-time, they're dedicated. Their role is to deal with acute mental illness as it's happening in the community. They respond to that. What else they do is follow up. If our officers go somewhere to some type of mental health call and our Pert team isn't on duty, but the officers feel like there needs to be a referral or some follow-up, that's best handled by Pert. We have a system set up where they do that, and Pert goes and follow up. We've had a sounding success with this program so far. Our Pert also provides training, additional training above and beyond what our officers already get. And so it's a really, really good thing. And we're really proud of this program. Something that's kind of on the horizon that's here is AB 41. If you haven't heard of this yet, it's online. It's a bill that was passed for law enforcement agencies to disclose, for lack of a better term, their equipment, funding, and acquisition and use. It basically deals with the police agency's possession and use of certain types of weapons. If you read the bill, it lists it as military, but the reality is these are law enforcement weapons, mostly used by our SWAT team. Part of AB 41 requires that our draft policy identifying this information go online for a minimum of 30 days. So just a week or 2 ago, we put that online. You can see that here. If you read it and you have a comment, an input, some recommendations, something you'd like to share about it, there's that opportunity to do that. So I would encourage you to take a look and leave us some feedback. Couple real quick points. The policy that we created does not disclose anything new that we're using. This is stuff that our SWAT team has been using for years. It's stuff that requires specialized training. Our personnel do that specialized training on a regular basis. So this isn't something necessarily that just rides around with every patrol car that you see driving around in a black and white. This is very specific training, or I'm sorry, equipment. You can go online to check that out. And also, we don't have any atypical equipment that would be kind of out of the ordinary. So you're not going to see a tank rolling down the street, down middle field, or anything like that. In fact, we have fewer types of equipment than most agencies in our area, which requires us to borrow equipment from other ones. And actually anything that we anticipate borrowing is also included in that policy. So please take a look. Ultimately, this will go before council, our governing body, to make it an ordinance, and then we'll be reporting on uses or changes on a yearly basis. So just wanted to highlight that. And lastly, this is why I'm hopeful. What's on the horizon? Well, there's a lot. There's a lot. And as the chief mentioned, our hiring is going very, very well. But one thing that it's more than just the numbers, and the numbers, the spots that we're filling that are coming in the door. You know, there was a question about what is the effect of COVID and remote work and police reform and recession and budget crunch and all those things. How is that going to affect government jobs and public safety? And for us specifically, the police department. And I will tell you, that was a question that we asked amongst ourselves on the management team. But I can confidently stand here and tell you that the quality of candidates that we're getting through the door is impressive. And we have young men and women who still have that call to serve despite everything that's going on, and they want to serve this community. And it's kind of like an airline. There's a lot of choices out there, but Palo Alto is drawing them in. And we're really proud of that because the applicant pool is shallow and the competition is fierce. And I just want to rest assured that the men and women that we're going to be training and hiring and putting on the streets are going to be men and women that are going to police like we expect, and that is professionally and equitably. Since the chief's been here, and as we'll continue on, we'll have a continued focus on crime suppression, all those crimes, special attention to those property crimes that plague our city, and also the apprehension of criminals. You hear a lot about you know, bills and things going on. It's still our role to apprehend criminals and focus on crime suppression. We're going to do that. And then the last thing, alluding to the previous slide about our work in progress with keeping our public and our community informed about police activities. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to work, even though we had a reduction in our communications, our press information manager will continue to work with our media partners to be responsive. And with that, I'd like to bring Vice Mayor Koo back up to introduce our next speaker. Thank you very much.
Chief Ken, I haven't spoken for a long time, obviously. Chief Ken Duker has a distinguished career in Palo Alto, starting as a reserve police officer to becoming a patrolman and a detective before becoming involved full-time leading Palo Alto's Office of Emergency Services. Chief Duker's experiences in emergency preparedness goes well beyond Palo Alto and law enforcement. In 2003, he founded the startup company PowerFlare Corporation, which designs eco-friendly LED lights. He has also served as a chief operating officer for the Santa Clara-based fiber optics company C-Speed Corporation. Chief Duker also worked in the early 1990s as a corporate emergency planner for the Atlantic Richmond Company and gained experience during the 1994 earthquake in Northridge. Chief Duker holds a bachelor's degree from Pomona College, a law degree from Harvard University, various emergency management certifications, and an amateur radio license. And with that, Chief Duker.
Thanks, everybody. And I know the audience likes the ham radio license the most, but I'm not gonna so it's probably my best one. Well, hey, thanks everybody for being here in person, and for those who are online. We're about to conclude our presentation. My job as the OAS chief, we often joke, is to kind of fill in any gaps left by our colleagues in the police service or fire service. So there are not a lot of gaps because this is a very thorough presentation led by a really professional gentleman up here today. So I will advance my own slide. Here we go. Click. Okay, Gio. There we go. Thank God I have only a few slides. So, you know, when we talk about budget, we talk about resources. I think it's always helpful to kind of put that in context. So one of our jobs, if you will, in my group is to step back 30,000 feet or more and look at why are we doing any of the things that we do. You heard about statistics. You heard about number of fires, calls for service, crime stats. Those are a little bit lower level, but at a higher level, and the vice mayor brought this up, is what's that catastrophic scenario? What's the thing that could really throw us on our rear, if you will, put us on our heels? And FEMA gives us some guidance about that as a community, and it says that every city, every jurisdiction should, as a best practice, identify the threats and hazards that are likely to have an impact on the community. And the three categories, I'm not going to read all this, but they're natural disaster, technological, also known as accidental, and human caused. And humans have a real problem when we try to comprehend risk, because the first thing we like to do is deny it. We say, well, it's not going to happen to me. You heard Chief Blackshire said nobody in Paradise thought that they were going to have that in the middle of the night. Nobody sitting in their house tonight says, oh, this is the night my house is going to burn down. So denial is not just a big river in Egypt. It's also kind of baked into our psyche. The other thing is that we tend to have this kind of Hollywoodized concept of disaster. And Nathan Rainey and my colleagues, especially in emergency services, realize that we have to disabuse ourselves of the special effects and all the glitz and get down to, well, it's kind of the consequences usually, because even in a major earthquake, most of us are going to survive the shaking, right? We're all going to stop, cover, and hold. We all know that. Stop, drop, and roll, by the way, is if you're on fire. So don't stop, drop, and roll. That'll be hilarious, but stop, cover, and hold. And, you know, our modern buildings are a blessing for us. But what happens when there's no water and there's no power for weeks and weeks and weeks? So those are things we need to think about, second order. And I don't have my usual 5 hours to talk about that. So look at our website. Accidental, planes crash, chemicals get spilled, fires start accidentally. Those are there. And then human caused, right? Our colleagues in law enforcement alluded to this, that, yeah, we're a very safe community. That doesn't mean that we're exempt. Nobody says, oh, this can't happen in Palo Alto. I hope nobody thinks that. Stay tuned for my 5-hour lecture if you think that. Then the other thing, and we discussed this a little bit at City Council Finance Committee earlier today, we're in the midst of a pandemic that's, God willing, about to change to endemic, but nothing says we can't have a new virus, or, you know, knocking fake wood as it is. We don't get a hall pass, say, oh, sorry, we already have a pandemic. There's nothing that says we can't have another one. And it could be some totally different deal. So we need to really consider that those of us in healthcare and those of us in the first responder public safety community, we're thinking about this, and yet we're human. And we have fatigue factors. So Chief Bender just talked about this. You know, what's the impact of all these stressors that have been put on public safety, right, in general? Remote work for some, but not for all. What's going to happen when more and more people come back? The reason you see a dip in our crime stats and our police and fire calls for service, it's not magic. It's that fewer people are going to Palo Alto to work. That's almost completely the driver of those stats. And when people come back to work, and we want them to do that, it's good for the economy, it's good for human behavior. Well, of course, right, calls for service are going to go up. But what are the unknown unknowns that go with that? Maybe there's some psychiatric issues that are out there that could manifest in a dangerous and bad way when people come back. We've touched about most of this stuff, so I'll go to our next slide here. Annette is very familiar with this slide because it's kind of what are we going to do about this, right? Not we public safety, but we as a community. So there are really 4 key elements that we want to drive home. I know I'm preaching largely to the choir here, but if you haven't done so already, make a home or a family plan. That includes fire evacuation and all those good things. Build some kind of disaster kit. Remember, your kit needs to be where you are and needs to survive the disaster. So it probably means you have more than one. Be aware and stay informed. You saw the social media opportunities you can follow along. All of this, by the way, cityofpalto.org/preparedness takes you to all these links. So make sure those of you in the choir to whom I'm preaching, please share the good news, as it were, with your neighbors and your family members that they also need to visit that website. And finally, get involved. We have a number of emergency services volunteers here today. And thanks to staff, Lizette in the back there, we've got a lovely table. So if you've been interested in volunteering, or you've got friends and colleagues that you might convince to volunteer, we've got lovely handouts, which we hope you take many of those and hand them out on your way out of here tonight. So with that, I'm going to bring the vice mayor up. She's going to moderate the questions. The three chiefs are now going to move. And Nathan, are we leaving this? Oh, thank you. We can pull up all that. Are we leaving this microphone here for her? How are we doing this?
I think that we should have, we can try to leave that microphone on and see if we can-
Might get feedback. Okay, so, well, let's try. All right, Lydia, this is good for you. Questions?
I do have questions, and so if you think of any, please raise your hand and Annette will come to you. But we'll start off with the first question. Are roof vents high risk in Palo Alto as in Napa? I think that goes to Chief Blackshire. Are roof vents high risk in Palo Alto as in Napa?
I can't know about the.
Speak up.
Oh, sorry. I can stand up.
No, you don't need to stand up. Just you speak up.
Okay, so we're talking about the eaves of houses and are they as high a risk as they are in Napa? So I can speak for Palo Alto. I don't know, the demographic of homes and how they're made out there, but I can say that in Palo Alto, I mean, anywhere when you're out and you're getting debris that falls off trees or brushes into whether it's wood or patio or eaves. It's very combustible because it doesn't water, it dries out and lights very fast. So it's like flash fuel. And flashing fuels are dangerous, even in the wildland interface. If you look at the hills, light flashing burn the quick, especially up in the home. So in the home, concerned about our embers. If you really want to just idea related to that, but I remember the fire in a row when they were first building that, it caught fire, the largest fire in the history of the day. But what really impacted the surrounding areas were the shake roofs. And it was a windy day, and the embers from the fire were getting blown and landing on these shake roofs. And the units that burned were the ones that had these wooden roofs. So even if you had a composite roof or a tile roof, if you have something combustible on there, that's what's going to burn. And if it's windy, it's going to blow, and it's going to catch, and it's going to just domino. So. I can't speak for the danger, how we compare to Napa, but I can say that, that is a risk and a hazard that you should be aware of.
I think I'm just gonna stand near you. How is traffic control doing on University / Embarcadero / Alamo? How is traffic control doing on University?
So is that, so I can talk a little bit about our traffic efforts out there. We did unfortunately lose the traffic team due to budget cuts. That doesn't mean that there's not traffic enforcement still occurring within the city. We just had to find a new way to do that. And so we tasked our patrol officers with traffic enforcement throughout the city as complaints come in from our community. Hotspots, so to speak, or areas that need our attention, we'll send our officers out there. And if there's traffic enforcement, they'll dedicate time to handle that. I hope that answers the question. Radar. We can use radar. We have officers that are certified for radar. In the past it's been, you see the officer on the motorcycle, off the bike, or sitting on the bike with the radar guns. But we still have other officers in the building that also can use that. So when appropriate and when necessary, we will.
Chief Nathan
Okay,
has.
from the Zoom room, one question is, what have been the number of psychiatric calls pre-pandemic and post-pandemic? We didn't really have a Pert Team pre-pandemic, so maybe you could just talk about kind of how busy they've been.
Yeah, so to get those exact numbers, we'd have to dig in with a statistician. But I can tell you in regards to statistics with the Pert Team, we are keeping those.
We are reporting to the Behavioral Health Services, and we will report out on those. And I think what the statistics will show is that what Chief Johnson and I have been saying all along, that it's a really valuable tool that complements our patrol division. That acts as just another option for addressing acute mental illness in our community that doesn't necessarily involve the uniformed law enforcement officer. Kind of takes that out of the equation. And I didn't share it before on that slide, but the officer that is assigned to that Pert team actually wears like plain clothes. There is some, he wears like a polo shirt that says police on it, but otherwise it's plain clothes. And that's part of the approach that we want to have with that team.
The question was how many?
I'd like to follow up just real quick, just to add on to that, Chief Bender, if you could talk about, I think you mentioned this briefly in your slideshow, but sort of when are these people, when is this team active? Like, during the day, what are the hours kind of that where they're meeting the needs of the community, where we typically see the need for them to be active, and then if they're not available, who takes that call?
Yeah. So currently they're assigned, their schedule is flexible, but we do have, there is a duty concept. So generally they work from Sunday starting at noon till 10 p.m. So 4 10-hour shifts, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, generally from noon to 10. And, as far as statistics go, I would have to look to see, how many, we do track how many calls for service that we go to that involve specifically mental health. But I don't have those numbers offhand, so unfortunately I can't report on what we have before and after.
What do you do outside those hours?
Yes, thank you for that. We send patrol. And I will tell you that, our patrol officers are very equipped. They have extensive experience. And the state mandates that every law enforcement officer in California goes through mental health training. Officers go above and beyond that, and they have that as part of their cadre. Additionally, we the chief was talking today, one of our big emphasis, and we asked for some money back in our training budget. Not only do we have training on dealing with persons with mental illness, but also de-escalation and tactical communication. And all those things come into play.
You just keep the microphone and maybe you can repeat the question. How many sworn officers are SWAT trained? And how often on average is SWAT activated?
So the question was, how many officers are SWAT trained? So how many do we have on the SWAT team, and how often is the SWAT team activated? I believe our team is probably around 10 or 12. It fluctuates depending on injuries. They train once a month. They're not utilized very often here in Palo Alto. I'm actually happy to say they're always on the ready. They're very well trained. The last time we will deploy them for certain types of warrants, but the last big call out that the chief and I both probably remember was out on Tennessee Avenue a couple summers ago. We spent 32 hours on a barricaded subject who actually ultimately peacefully surrendered without injury to anyone. It was a really good outcome. It took a little bit of time, but our SWAT team that was the last time there was a major deployment.
I think
Okay.
the next one is for Chief Duker. You have a large base of volunteers. What do they do? How do they help in an emergency?
Great, so I'll repeat that so everybody can hear it. So we have a large emergency services volunteer program with many members, and the question is kind of what are the roles of our ESVs in an emergency? So I'll keep it kind of short and sweet, but those three categories that FEMA gave us, almost all of those, but not all of them, would cause us to utilize our ESVs in some way or another. And in some cases, we use ESVs for I'll call it planned special events, such as the Mayfet parade that we just had. So thanks to Karen Pauls and others who helped organize that and put it all together. And the ESVs who participated, we found the lost child. We We gave some first aid, so hats off. That's kind of the feel good and peacetime mission. The other part is our crime prevention. Our neighborhood watch function is actually under our ESV, our block preparedness coordinator umbrella. So that's another big role on a day-to-day peacetime basis. Clearly, when we have, and I say why not, if a major earthquake, a major storm, certain other events that disrupt our day-to-day public safety operations, we're going to rely on emergency service volunteers to do two big things for us. One is that they'll actually be the first responders in their own neighborhoods. That's why we have a community emergency response team. We have people with special training who will go and render aid to each other. The block preparedness coordinators and the amateur radio operators and the other members of our ESV program are going to do the assessment of the neighborhood, what happened, and provide communications. So those are really kind of the core missions for the ESVs. There are many, many more, but I'll keep the answer kind of short and sweet. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Okay, so this may not be one that we can really answer tonight, but is there a way to report minor annoyances like signal timings?
Well, I'll let Chief Bender do that. There are ways to, like traffic engineering, but I'll let Chief Bender.
Yeah, I mean, you can call our non-emergency line, 329-413, hopefully I got that right. And can let our communications know, and they'll get a hold of the appropriate division. We'll see if we can get that fixed for you.
Is there another city information source that people can tap into to report that stuff?
I think Public Works Engineering Transportation has a
Yeah.
website. Yeah, it's probably, I would start to answer that question if you have something ready to traffic signal timing signage. The city has an Office of Transportation, OTS. So look on the city's webpage and the traffic engineers and all the people who can correct that are there. I know that's confusing to the general audience. They think the public safety handles all of it, but we do not. That's Office of Transportation.
In case of a fire, what is the fastest way to find its location and extent so as to plot an escape route if needed?
One more time? I gotta repeat that one.
In case of a fire, what is the fastest way to find its location and the extent and as to plot an escape route if needed?
Okay, so in short, it's if there's a fire, what's the fastest way to locate it in order to find the best way to get out, the quickest, something to.
And how big it is.
How big it is. So let's just generally say this is in a home. So depending on, there's some moving factors that weigh in on this determination. The time of day, is it in the evening? How long has it been burning? Is it so much smoke? I mean, if it's enough smoke, you can find it, you can get out. If you're opening up the door, there's a ton of smoke, you just close it or probably go out the window, be the best. I'm sorry.
So I asked the question, I'm at a forest fire. I didn't use-
Oh, forest fire, okay. All right, so, okay. So, yeah, that's, depending, it's really difficult to determine where the smoke is coming from your vantage point. The best way to get an idea where it's coming from is usually from a high, usually if I'm in the office at City Hall and I see something burning, I can't see where it's coming from. But if you're, let's say out of the park and you see smoke, the best thing you can do is just make your best guess from your, there's tools on your phone, you can say which direction it's coming from, use your best guess. But once you say, I see smoke, foothills, general direction, we'll get resources out there, but we also have access through mutual aid, through CAL FIRE's helicopter. What they'll do is they'll get it from their closest station, which is the ALMA station, and they're actually working on deploying it, probably by next summer, they'll have a helicopter deploying it from off the field. But we get that in the air real quick, and they'll get an idea where that is, and they also have a fixed wing unit that they could also put in the sky. But that's the fastest way we can make that determination.
Is there a website or something that the average person can look at and say, here's the fire, so I need to keep an eye on this and I can run this thing? I get this question a lot from my neighbors.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so you just the idea of where the fire is, where it's going, that type of thing. The best website you can get on, well, if through CAL FIRE and incidents, and on their website, they also have links of, you could actually see where the fire is going, they give updates. The best way to get the update, that's the best way to get updated information on the website, is updated constantly. Trying to think another way that you can see the fire. Yeah, so we have, so the county is engaged in a program called Zone Haven. And that's going to be accessible, and you'll see this phrase coming out called Know Your Zone. And what it is each zone that's in proximity to the wildland urban interface, those residents will be given a zone. And when that zone is activated, it'll give you an idea of how the best way to get away from the fire, to evacuate from that fire, the safest way as well. And the difficult part about evacuation is knowing where to go, but also what's coming. Because as you're trying to get away, we have fire units and other emergency responders going up. So you have to be really cognizant of the best way out. But Zone Haven, once we release that, and actually county fire already doing exercises on that, and we're not too far behind. I saw a hand up.
That services and like experiences. Most people look at Google Maps and they say the red areas and that has very big landing on them. So if you're trying to plot your evacuation route, don't go to the red road. So if you don't where that is, you move it on that, not that. And that pretty much that's what people say all these that these fires, they just put it in the map, block up. Yeah.
Yeah, and the key is also pre-planning. You have to sit and say, if there's a fire, what are the routes that I can get out? Where are the places, if it's the middle of the night, where are places of refuge? Sometimes there's large parking lots where if you don't know where the fire is, or it seems like there's a lot of activity, sometimes if you get just to a large area that has a lot of, we call that a safety zone. That just sometimes it'll, it may be if you're near a golf course, or if you may be a large parking lot, or a large, schools that are in the area, or buildings that are in the area that are really non-combustible, if you will. But know that in advance, so in the middle of the night when it happens, you know exactly where you're going, you know exactly where you can go, and alternate routes. That's why we say have two ways getting out of your house. It's not necessarily the front of the back door, behind your window. Same thing when you're driving away from your house. What are the directions that you can go? So if you know that the fire is, in this direction, your exit is probably in that direction. You don't want to go towards the fire. So you could look at a map, Google Maps, or no map, just look at the different routes out, and make the determination. Well.
Okay, so this would be for Chief Bender. What is the PD doing to stop the proliferation of car break-ins?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, that is definitely one of our big problems here in Palo Alto, and actually I will say it's a regional problem, and that comes into part of the solution. So there's really two things we're doing mainly to combat that. One is on our patrol level, our uniformed officers, and we also have special officers that's dealing with a lot of the issues downtown and at the mall. And it's high visibility patrol. It's working on surveillance in certain areas, using finding out where these are happening through statistical analysis or data analysis, and being there, and then being responsive to doing really good investigations when these things come up, because we find that there's generally some type of evidence that's left behind that our patrol officers can pick up and then work with and turn that over to our investigators. We do a really, really amazing job at following up on a lot of these cases. And that second component involves those detectives who work with regional partners and task forces, because we're finding that a lot of our crews that are committing our auto burglaries are regional. And so they may hit Palo Alto one day, they may do Mountain View the next day, they may be up in Redwood City or Belmont the other day. And there's a lot of intelligence sharing, a lot of information sharing, and there's a lot of the behind the scenes investigations to put pieces of the puzzle together to form a comprehensive investigation that leads to identification of these crews and these perpetrators, and then subsequent criminal charges. And so that's where we focus the majority of our efforts. So from a patrol perspective, being out there, being visible, investigating these things, and then on the back end with our investigators and follow up. Sir.
In addition addition to that, I think we should put a lot of effort into educating the public to not leave valuables visible in their car, because that's what thieves look for. They look for an opportunity.
Yeah, and if you didn't hear that, that's just an excellent point that's been brought up before. And the point that was made is, don't leave stuff visible in your car. And that could be as simple as that lunchbox, that jacket, that innocuous computer bag. I will tell you, and my 3 kids will tell you, we don't go anywhere in the park in public with anything visible in the car. Because it's a prolific problem here in the Bay Area. And so lock your doors, don't leave anything visible. If you have to take valuable belongings with you, put them in the trunk. As officers, sometimes we have to travel with our off-duty weapons. If for some reason you have to leave that, we leave those secure. We issue all our officers lock boxes for their vehicles, so we take that very seriously. But yeah, don't leave anything in there that you think might attract the interest, because we're finding that these car break-in criminals they're criminals of opportunity. And so if they look into your car and they don't see anything in there, they're going to go to the next one. And if they look into the neck of your neighbor's car and that has something in it, that's going to be one of their issues to break into. And what's very, very frustrating for us, that you may see videos floating around, is an auto burglary can go down in a matter of seconds. And I will tell you, from the time that the car pulls up to that the thieves break it into your window and steal your belongings and drive off, can be less than 30 seconds easy. And it can be very hard to catch these crooks, and they're criminals of opportunity.
I think this might be actually for both Chief Blackshire and Duker. The CZQ Lightning Complex fire came close to Palo Alto. Are there proactive protection programs to prevent and mitigate wildland fires?
So it was actually really, what was that?
Good question.
Oh, good question, I'm sorry. So there was a reference to the CZU fire that was actually west of Skyline, and how close it was to Palo Alto. As a crow flies, it was, goodness, about 3 miles or so, maybe less. And fortunately, it wasn't windy that day, and it was pretty steady, and we were safe. But the best thing that we can do is just keep an eye on it and prepare for evacuation. Fires that burn that hot, that heavy, they don't go out easily. And, we have to come up with a huge plan, and the plan is to, depending on the fire, what it's doing. But, we don't have enough water on our fire engines to just put a fire like that out. I mean, for example, that CCU fire had up to 15,000 firefighters on there, and it was not going out. So the best thing we can do is primarily make sure that the life safety, make sure people are evacuated. And then what we do is we try and draw a box around the fire. So we look for major barriers or roads or ways that we can say, okay, we have to maybe use this road or a lake or anything, and just, sometimes we have to burn the fire back. We'll go to a road and light the fire, hoping that it'll like burning a candle at both ends, because sometimes water is just not going to put that out. And when you see the plane drop that red retardant on there, that's just to suppress the fire. That is not going to put the fire out. So in those cases, we have very little control over what the weather's going to do to that fire, where it's going to go, how hot it's going to burn. All we can do is just make sure we address the life safety. And when we go out on these fires, the units that are out there generally park around the homes to protect the homes when the fire is going past it. So we're trying to protect the homes. So in regards to just putting that fire out, that's really not realistic to say we're just going to put a fire out and burn that out. Just put it out. So we have to, hopefully just come up with a strategy that contains the fire to the best of our ability. And hopefully the weather is on our side.
Thanks. I'll just add,
Mitigation was the second half of that.
Mitigation's the second question. So there are two pieces of this. One is to prevent the ignition from the get-go. So there are programs at the City of Palo Alto, CAL FIRE, County Fire, Woodside Fire, a lot of regional approaches to reduce what are called fuels, which is a euphemism for things that burn, mainly plants and shrubs and things of that sort. Most wildland fires that are human caused start within 30 feet of the roadway. So that would be sparks from the vehicle, cigarettes out the window, broken glass that could start a fire when the sun hits it like a magnifying glass, a lot of causes. So there's a lot of work that's being done regionally. If you want to Google Fire State Council, the Fire State Councils are a nonprofit that bring all of us together in public safety along with other nonprofits to try to reduce fuels and increase safety. The other thing that we're working on, alluded a little bit to, is the Foothill Fire Early Warning System is kind of in concept phase now, as Chief Blacksher discussed, that there are helicopters and other air resources. The issue with that is they're not flying all the time. So we're trying to get better early warning, especially up in our greater wildland urban interface, the foothills, with sensors that could give us a chance to stop something before it grows so large you can't do anything about it. So that's the other part of that question.
Just a quick follow-up on that.
Go ahead.
I think drones are a really easy and cheap way to monitor from.
Drones can be part of our longer term strategy would be to use drones as well. It's a great point because if you just have fixed cameras, you can't actually see down the ravine. So we want to monitor drone. If Chief Blacksher sits in his office and he sees something 10 miles to the west, he sees a plume of smoke, but we don't know, is that a car crash? Is that a barbecue? Is it just steam coming off something? We don't know until you can go fly over it and look at it and sniff it. So ultimately, yes, drones will be part of the total package, and we're working with City Council to find a way to authorize that kind of technology. Thank you.
No pressure. One last question. How do they get the slides?
We can probably just post these slides up on the city website. So, okay, yeah, we'll post it on probably on the OES page. We'll post it somewhere. maybe on the invite page. So we post it there. Great. Good. Was that our final question?
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that, I was told time, and we want to finish on time. So I want to take a moment to thank a person who is behind all the coordination and organization for this event, Emergency Services Coordinator Nathan Rain. It takes a lot of work to set this up. I worked with him when we were doing drills, and he helped me with all the behind setup, the logistics and everything, and he did a superb job. So I know it takes work to do all the technology and make sure that everything is running well. Other person I want to thank from OES is Lizette. Thank you so much for that lovely table. Make sure you stop by. And of course, I want to thank Annette Blankoff for her continued support for the Emergency Services Volunteer Program and events, always planning events such as it is to ensure that the community is connected with the public servants. Thank you so much. And of course, I'd be remiss not to thank the chiefs, Chief Blackshadow, Chief Johnson, Chief Bander, and Chief Duker. In closing, I want to say that while we do have police, fire, and emergency services, we each also have a responsibility for our own well-being and safety. And we have a role in the well-being and safety of our community as well. When a big disaster hits, life gets local pretty quickly. And our neighbors are what you have to work with. They are what counts during emergencies. And they will most likely be your first responders in a natural disaster, and that can be you as well. So don't hunker down on your own during an emergency. Instead, be a part of building a resilient community as a City of Palo Alto Emergency Services volunteer. You can find more information on the city website. Go to cityofpaloalto.org/emergency volunteers. With that, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
He's moderating, they're getting all these questions.